Good evening. I'm here to talk about the subprime crisis and some of the players involved. Um, Now, we're going to start with the first two players be people who got one home loan despite having weak credit history. They were given adjustable rate mortgages with low introductory interest rates. They were given these loans at a time when there was basically a housing bubble created by the Federal Reserve, lowering interest rates down to the 1% range or a little above for a few years between approximately 2000 and 2003. That action also led to the creation of this second group of people, because by lowering interest rates into the 1% range, there was a housing bubble creating rapidly rising housing prices. That enabled the second group of people who owned one home and who had good credit to go ahead and leverage that single home ownership into multi-home holdings. They basically became landlords holding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 houses. Now, third group I see is amateur mortgage retailers, the people who put up the stuff on the telephone poles saying no money down, bad credit, we don't care, you can get a house, and signing people up at swap meets and stuff. You had your traditional small professional real estate brokers, and you had your local banks. There's another group involved, and your local savings and loan and local credit unions. In the old days, there was basically just people who would buy one loan, one home, get a mortgage, they had good credit, and these people right here set it up, and these people were basically the loan originators. Nowadays, these people just pass the loan up the chain. It goes to larger companies that are now the loan originators. Large mortgage companies like Countrywide Financial, investment banks, directly or through funds, and regional banks. These loan originators turn around and sell these loans to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and FHA. And these are government-backed mortgage companies, and I believe these three companies will probably go under this year. They may be saved by the legislators, but they'll be basically insolvent. So I believe there's big losses to come for the U.S. taxpayers there. Now, the rest of these mortgages, a great deal of them were sold to company Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan. They packaged these into structured investment vehicles and a thing called CDOs, which is another investment vehicle. These investment vehicles were basically a stew of assets that all kinds of different equities, but basically the base was made of these loans that started down here with these first two groups. Now, the interest rates were raised by Bernanke at the Federal Reserve over a period of time, and by 2006 they were up in the 5% range. That ended this bubble. These people really couldn't pay at that point. The people who had the adjustable rate mortgages, as their loans were rising. When their loans reset, that created big troubles. Now, we go back here. These loans had been packaged into SIVs and CDOs and resold to firms like Citibank, B of A, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Wachovia, Lehman, SunTrust, US Bank, Merrill Lynch, WaMu, Bear-Stearns, etc., and various hedge funds. Now, the company that put together these SIVs and CDOs, Goldman Sachs, they went ahead and sold these securities that were basically based on junk mortgages to these companies. Knowing that these mortgages would implode as the interest rates rised and the bubble ended, Goldman Sachs went ahead and bet against the price of these, bet basically against these companies on the stock market. They did what's called put options. So when these people couldn't pay because their interest rates went up and the whole subprime crisis started, these companies started taking huge losses. Their stock prices dropped. When their stock prices dropped, the company that put together the loans packages, the SIVs and CDOs, made tons of money because they had bet against these companies. They bet that these companies would go down because they had bought junk. Now, another hedge fund that made out well was a hedge fund called Oak Ziff that did the same thing, put in put options against all these companies. Right after all this was done, Greenspan, the chairman of the Federal Reserve back when the interest rates were 1%, and who created the bubble, he got a director's position with Oak Ziff. Now, just a coincidence. Now, this money that went over here to J.P. Morgan, basically, it went right back out in salaries and bonuses. They paid $50 billion in compensation to their employees, and so that money went away. And while these companies took big hits in their stock markets, and Bear-Stearns almost went under, while all this was happening, their employees were taking big bonuses, salaries, and perks. Now, these rating agencies that worked over here with Goldman Sachs and rated the SIVs and CDOs and told everybody they were wonderful and safe investments, they made a lot of money. Attorneys made a lot of money putting this stuff together that no one understands. And, of course, the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and FHA executives are making tons of salary and bonuses, and they got money for lobbying, and everybody's got money for lobbying. And now, these losses here were absorbed mainly through the stock market, and so stock market investors lost, state and county pension funds, 401k plan holders, and other fund holders lost. When the losses got real severe and Bear-Stearns was about to go under, the Fed Reserve realized they had, and the legislators realized things were getting a little out of hand, so they let these companies dump their worst over here into Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and FHA. And so our government-backed companies got some more bad loans that I believe will eventually cost the taxpayers a lot of money. Now, your SEC seems to just be out here golfing or something. The Treasury Department isn't nowhere to be found. Got a little initial here, HP, and money's flowing to him from everywhere. And now, over here, there were some hedge funds that made money because, amazingly enough, other hedge funds, which you would think these were wise people, basically they sold assets that were big piles of junk to other funds, so one fund becomes a big winner and the other fund becomes a big loser. Now, some of these funds that happen to be big winners were funds that the think tanks, the endowment funds for think tanks, had invested a lot of money in. And of course, the funds that took the big losses, those were, the state and county pension funds and 401k plan holders. And so, as you can see, all the money went all over the place, out of taxpayers' hands and out of hardworking people's hands. These people are taking all the blame, and that's not really fair because although these people were anxious to get a home and may have gotten a little exuberant and jumped the gun, they just were trying to get in on the American dream, and they're going to take a big loss and, suffer. The second group, they ended up being basically landlords, and they worked their, tips off, and they really put out a lot of work, and they ended up losing everything, most of them. So these people are taking all the blame. They're being called greedy, but actually there were people up here that orchestrated the bubbles, that controlled everything that happened. So these people were just along for the ride. They're your neighbors. They might have made mistakes, but they were just trying to live the American dream, get their first home, become business owners, and expand their business. So let's look at who should really be blamed. And you've got the Federal Reserve, companies that sold junk and bet against it at the same time, and individuals that went to work for firms that did the same, all these people that drained money through employee bonuses and salary, and the owners of the Federal Reserve most of all. Okay, so let's quit blaming our neighbors, despite what the people who work in the media and who are connected to these think tanks are trying to get us to do.